What is up, friends? Not a Spy here with some Star Wars Battlefront 2 for War for Wednesdays. Kind of talking about something I've been thinking about lately. Well, some news that came out that kind of pissed me off. As you know, currently EA owns the rights to the Star Wars video game franchise license, I guess. Not franchise, but the license as a whole. And the Battlefront 1 came out. Easily one of the best aesthetic Star Wars games ever made. Great sound, beautiful quality, and 4 maps, and half the game modes weren't even out at launch, and you had to pay DLC. It was just a cash cow. Not a lot of depth in gameplay. It was fun, and it had some neat things. And I've actually played the version with all the DLC, and it's pretty fun. It's a pretty good game, but it was just shitty business practices. So EA is like, you know what? We're sorry. We're going to make things right. And so Battlefront 2 gets announced, and they're like, all the DLC is free. There's no season pass. That you can just pay the game and buy the game, and it's yours. Fucking awesome. It looks amazing. They've added a lot more content and maps, allegedly. They've added heroes. They fixed the hero system. They made it function like it does. This is about the original Battlefront 2, and this where the better you perform, the more you get, the more likely you are to get access to a hero. And just on the whole, a lot of good decisions. Then I found out, and I'm going to link down below, they are planning to change, well, not change, but so good news is you don't have to pay to play, you don't have to pay for DLC, but you have to fucking buy loot crates. And these aren't like Overwatch style loot crates. These are, it's similar to that, but instead of being cosmetic, it's honest to God pay to win. Yes, we want to play as Obi-Wan. We always want to play as Obi-Wan. Of course we want to play as Obi-Wan. And so what it is these crates, every single class in the game, which it's went back to a class system, once again, similar to this, with customizing weapons and abilities and shit like that. Great. Absolutely great. And these loot crates fucking drop okay, if you play this class, you get a 50% health increase, or as low as 10% health increase, depending on the rarity of the drop you got from the loot crate. What does that mean? That means you have to buy multiple loot crates just to get the best drop of item. And you can get them through in-game progress, but you can also just buy them, and if it's following anything like most games do with in-game progress for unlock, it'll take an hour to 2 hours just to get a single box, to get 5 cards, or you can just spend money, get all the cards from the get-go. And that's just frustrating. It's pay to win. The people who put the more money to get the more crates, to get the more buffs, and it's not just health, it's damage too. Or okay, my jump there. What they've done to help maximize profits, so there's a larger variety, so you can't just get the one health upgrade or the health upgrade for the class. They'll say gain 50% extra health while running, 50% extra health while jumping, 50% extra health while doing blank, to force you to be more likely to have to play or buy, so that way you can have that health bonus constantly. And then it'll be 50% extra gun damage while shooting this gun in this situation. And you might think that balances it out, but it doesn't, because the people that are going to spend money are going to get those cards one way or the other. But people who are just wanting to play the game or pick up and play the game, if you don't either sit and grind the shit out of it, and even if you do grind the shit out of it, there's no guarantee you will have a much smaller crate pool than someone who just drops money into it. It's pay to win bullshit, and it's so fucking frustrating, because here you have this game that when it came out was groundbreakingly insane, just how awesome it was. there's tons of maps, tons of content. There's a functional campaign mode with a very interesting story following Darth Vader's personal legion of clones. I mean, and yes, that one's supposed to have a promising story, and yes, it is an improvement in some ways to the first game. But fuck me, is pay to win just absolute bullshit. Like, it just ruins the game. It ruins any chance of having fun with the game online because it boils down to less of a matter of skill or even like strategy with the class system and more to a matter of who spent more money on the game, who's unlocked more things, who has the better unlocks from what they've had drop. Just silliness. I know there's an argument out there because I was having this conversation with a good friend of mine that this is like in this day and age. I mean, games have been $60 forever. Games have been $60 since the either Nintendo Entertainment System or Super Nintendo Entertainment System, but the average price for a new game is $60. I get that. I totally get that. I get that, you know, without changing the prices, what they're doing is it's harder to make their money back, and especially with AAA games where you have to spend a lot more money and time on designing and 3D modeling and animations and all that shit. It's expensive, and you need to make your money back, and I get that. And there's ways to do that, though, without completely fucking over the customer. Like, season passes are so common and microtransactions are so common in AAA development games because the $60 price point makes them lose a bit of money on it. And I kind of want to do research to see how much they're losing on it, because I feel like that might be a little bit of bullshit. Like, they still might make some money. But, and I should have came prepared for this, but this is kind of my thoughts on it at the moment, and maybe next week we'll discuss it some more. But what, like, Overwatch, look at Overwatch as a whole. Overwatch is all content for Overwatch, the new maps, the new characters, completely free. The only thing you had to buy with Overwatch was the video game itself and the loot crates, which were completely optional and only cosmetic. Which, if it was strictly cosmetic, there's so many cosmetic things you can do with Star Wars. Dozens and dozens of alien races that you could introduce as playable. Customizable gun loadouts. One video I watched actually suggested the idea of being able to customize the laser of your blasters, the color of the blaster laser. So, like, I could make this purple or green or just silly shit like that, or sprays. Simple things that would allow them to make their money, but not fuck over the player base that just wants to buy the game itself, and not make it an unfair thing, even for, like, regardless of how much you put into it, you could still have fun. How much financially. And yes, I totally get Overwatch and Battlefront 2 as just scopes and, like, visually and what's being asked of the game developer and what's being created are two different things. And so Blizzard can get away with that. But look at Call of Duty. Call of Duty as a whole lost a lot of sales with Infinite Warfare. And I just love playing as clone troopers. They lost a lot of sales with Infinite Warfare. Part of that's because there's been a Call of Duty that's came out every year for the past 12 years. That fucked them up a little bit. But another major thing that kind of fucked them up is they introduced a similar microtransaction loot box system. With, I think it was Black Ops 3 or Advanced Warfare, they introduced getting cosmetic items, and people bought those optionally, and they most definitely still made their money, and that was even without a free season pass. That was people still having to pay for maps and shit. But with Infinite Warfare, they introduced like a rarity and customizable gun thing, where you could get a gun drop that was just objectively better, did more damage, better fire rate, everything like that. And it was just objectively a better gun because you got a better loot crate, and you could buy those loot crates. And that, I mean, Infinite Warfare is the worst selling Call of Duty in many, many, many years. And they actually, I think they lost a little bit of money, or no, they made some on it. I can't quite recall. Boba Fett. But so I mean that shows the point though. Is it's not impossible to make money. Even like if you have to charge for a season pass, I would honestly rather pay for a season pass with the content I want than making a game pay to win. Because making it pay to win is just going to hurt it so much worse in the long run, like so much. Because your online player base are less likely to stick with the game when they realize that that's what's going on. You're going to have less sales on the whole because people don't want to support bad business practices. And you're trying to bank on the Star Wars license to carry it for you. Yes, Star Wars as a license is very popular and makes a lot of money. But bad business practices will still fuck you over. Like, that's what happened to Star Wars Galaxies, is like, they expected that license to make them a lot of money, and then they released an incomplete game, and it led to reduced sales than their goals, and it made them feel frustrated and disappointed. I know this is kind of like pissing in the wind right now because I have no major influence on the video game industry or anything like that, but the power lies in us as consumers, because if we don't buy this and don't support this practice, then maybe future companies can take a hint and not follow suit. I mean, look at fucking Middle-earth Shadow of War is introducing pay-to-win type crates for a single-player experience, which if you want to add that, I don't know, like, it depends how much content's being cut, and I have to pay for just, like, in-game unlockables. Like, in the original Shadow of Mordor, there were these awesome in-game unlockables that modified how your weapons and abilities would work, and you got them through either, like, difficult hunts or killing a powerful orc war boss, or just finding them, like, hidden throughout the world, things like that. And they would, like, add fire damage to your sword, or beast remain under your control longer, like, just different modifications like that. And now I can just straight out buy them. It kind of cheapens the experience. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough thing. Like, I get you have to make money, but there's also a point where you gotta say, that's some fucking bullshit. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, I'm so frustrated with modern developers on the whole right now, because the majority of them are just, like, fucking trying to rip you off. I guess that's one thing I like about, and why my favorite types of games are predominantly games made early 360 era and before that. Because when Xbox Live took off is when things changed. Oblivion was the first game to really experiment with DLC, and Fallout 3 was the one that kind of got it down, and Modern Warfare 1 introduced the $15 standard for map packs. But before that, I mean, if you played a shooter online, there was expansions for MMOs, most definitely, but that was needed just to keep the MMO fresh. If you've ever played an MMO, you know that shit is just, like, you play through that content so much just by playing the game that you have to add fresh content to keep it entertaining. Whereas with a lot of game developers back then, it was, like, if a game came out on the PlayStation 2, it was a double-edged sword. Because if you had game-breaking bugs, people wouldn't buy it. It was a piece of shit, and there was no way to fix it. But on the other hand, you couldn't sell an incomplete game. If you sold an incomplete game, it would be the end of your company. It would just completely fuck you over. And now we're in an age where you can sell a piece of shit game and get away with it by saying if people spend more money, you'll make the game better. And it's a mixture of us as consumers supporting the practices. Honestly, what boils down the majority of the issue. Like, as long as we continue to buy it and buy the season passes and buy things like that, then it'll let the consumer or the people that make the games and sell the games think it's okay to do. A great example of how you can do this and make your money but still make a good game is The Witcher 3. Witcher 3 is so phenomenal in the fact that it made multiple DLCs, released as a base $60 game, had free content, and then they introduced brand new DLCs that were essentially new games for a fair price. But if you didn't have those DLCs, if you took away the free DLCs and you took away the paid DLCs, the base game by itself was a complete and full experience. Whereas you compare that to, well, okay, that's a bad comparison because it's an RPG versus a first-person shooter. But I mean, let's look at this Battlefront 2 to Star Wars Battlefront 1. This Star Wars Battlefront 1 that got remade by EA had no single-player experience, had no single-player experience, had only 2 factions, had 4 maps, and 3 game modes. Well, it had a single-player experience, just not a very good one. It's just like, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point, so I think I'll wrap up. I'm very frustrated. Like I said when I introduced the idea of War for Wednesdays, Star Wars is something very near and dear to my heart. And when it was with LucasArts, yes, it had shitty games and just things that never should have been made, but at least it was a video game. Like, they were really good games. And right now, EA's track record with Star Wars has just been abysmal, to say the least. And it definitely makes me concerned for the future of the franchise and the series of Star Wars video games. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. Am I overreacting, being a little bitch, or do you agree that this might be like a sign of things to come with the industry as a whole? I'm going to play a little bit as Darth Maul, probably finish this up as the Sis, and we'll call it a day. I don't know. Like I said, I'm rambling, and I kind of feel like I'm pissing in the wind a little bit, but it's just something I'm very passionate about, you know. Star Wars is something I love a lot. The movies are good. Why the fuck is the audio just totally go out? Does that happen when I alt tab? That's interesting. The movies were very good and fun experiences. For me, my favorite thing about Star Wars has always been the expanded universe, and regardless if Disney says it's canon or not, it's still enjoyable. Like, just the characters and the setting as a whole, and it's a space opera, but it's one of those universes where you can tell any type of story. Like, a lot of fictional universes, you can only tell a specific handful of stories. Whereas with Star Wars, you can tell the story of a farm boy coming and becoming a hero, or a princess learning to come down to earth. Things of that nature, well, and that's a bit grandiose even, but even like you can have those grandiose tales as well as just here's the day-to-day life of a humble soldier, which is told through the story of Battlefront 2, or here's the story of a Jedi in the Academy. Like, you can get all these interesting stories about every facet and class and member of a society without it sounding like shitty, being bad, or boring. There's let me gather my thoughts here for a second. There's a lot of universes out there that it would be difficult, like the universe itself isn't fleshed out enough to tell a variety of tales. You'd have to tell a specific story, or a specific type of story, or it isn't marketable or entertaining to watch. And I can't think of any universes off the top of my head, but there are universes that maybe aren't as fleshed out as they could be. And Star Wars is one of those universes that it's an entire thought-out sci-fi universe. It's every aspect of it has been thought of, and the interactions of races and species, and even a lot of people find Star Wars politics and hate the prequels partly because it's mostly political talk, but I love Star Wars politics because it's so entertaining and fascinating that even the day-to-day political drama between two lowly Senate members can have such a huge impact on the world, and how has been thought out, like what these characters would be like. It fascinates me, and it makes the world that much more easy to escape into when you focus on those little details. And so then when you do something like put those details behind more and more money and kind of cover them up and make the franchise less of like a fun fictional world to escape into, and more like a here, pay money so you can pay money for like an hour of content or shit like that, or just making it a cash cow on the whole, which Star Wars was originally part of the reason the movies were originally made, was to make toys to make money off of. But that's besides the point. Like, it still had heart and soul in it, and I feel like a lot of the heart and soul of Star Wars is kind of leaving it. A very good example of this is Star Wars, the animated series, The Clone Wars. The which, not the 2003 one that was 2D, but there was a 3D animation one called Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and it was actually really fucking good. I was going into it a bit hesitant because it's a 3D animated cartoon based on the prequels and the events between episodes 2 and 3. And it tells a very interesting story of the main characters, but also how the war between the Trade Federation and the Republic was tearing apart the Republic itself, and how you could see from the perspective of someone in the Trade Federation why they would side with them, looking at the corruption of Republic governments and like the extremes of taxation and everything like that. It was just very good storytelling. And then with Star Wars Rebels, it's just, I don't know, I guess they made it more kid friendly, which Clone Wars had some dark parts, but it was also like, it had good kid moments too. It was able to stay a children's television show, but like, I don't know, loyal to its origins, whereas the new series that they ended Clone Wars for, which is called Star Wars Rebels, I don't think it has the same writing department. I just think it has the same animators. Is like that as a TV series is completely different. It's just flat out fucking wacky, because it's less, here's a glimpse into the life of people in the Star Wars universe, and more, here's your traditional Star Wars story, which I love, vanilla, here's a nobody turns somebody through a series of events Star Wars story, but it's done in such just like a cheesy and tacky way, and the stories aren't even interesting to follow. And there's just things that happen in the show that are just ridiculous to watch. They introduced a type of lightsaber based on Darth Maul's design, where if you looking at his lightsaber right now, if you cut that lightsaber probably in about in half, and it was just a really thin stick, and then it had a circle around the center, and then that stick, or a circle around with the stick in the center, and the circle spun around the stick to where you'd have two blades kind of like coming out and spinning while keeping the handle center, so you could spin it and advance in a very menacing way, which is an awesome design. And they introduced that lightsaber, amazing, here's points for being creative. And then their next step after that is to have people fly with those lightsabers by spinning them and pointing it up, which lightsabers, in the very name, it's like a beam of pure light. It doesn't create wind. If anything, it destroys it by burning ozone, and that's enough to propel someone up. Like, it's just silly. And I know people are like, well, there's not lightsabers in real life, so why? Like, when it comes to fictional universes, you want to introduce fictional item blank. That's great. Introduce fictional item blank. Do fun things with it. Make it cool. Good for you. But if you're if it's still following the rules of the real world and the only thing that are different is maybe the science or anything like that, unless you say otherwise, unless you specifically state otherwise, it's still going to follow those rules. Just the only thing separating it from the real world is the existence of those things. Like, it'll still obey the laws of physics. I don't know. I'm just a nerd tangent rant type thing, and that's kind of been my thought process since I found out a few days ago. But I just kind of wanted to put out a video. And like I said, leave a comment down below. I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts. Remember to rate the video, like the video, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.